Chapter 11. Blinding lights assaulted my eyes. I stood firmly in the street shrine, but the street had vanished. Incense smoke lingered in the air. The god sat toad-like in his alcove. The girl hung limply in my arms. As the ground stabilized beneath me, I stumbled, thrown off balance by the sudden return of the girl's weight, and reached out blindly for support. "Give her to me!" a voice demanded, and the girl's lifeless body was taken from my grasp. A powerful hand clutched my elbow. I found a chair and gratefully collapsed into it. "The transmission is not yet smooth between such distant terminals," the voice explained. "I see Mielin has fainted again. A weakling, but useful." Blood filled my mouth as I struggled to focus on my surroundings. I was in a room made of some translucent material, devoid of windows, with a skylight high above that allowed pink daylight to stream in. Daylight, and it had been midnight in Charon. I had traversed half the planet in mere seconds. The sound of tinkling bell-like hammers echoed through the room. I looked up to see a man, or something resembling a man, watching me. On Coruscant, I had encountered all manner of human, half-human, and non-human life, but I had never seen anything quite like this. He was tall and lean, with a human-like shape but oddly defined muscles, hinting at something less than human in his posture. He wore green, tight-fitting trunks and a shirt of green fur that revealed bulging biceps where they should not be, and angular planes where muscles should have been. His shoulders were high, his neck sinuous, and his face, a little too narrow for human standards, was strikingly arrogant, with a mischievous alertness that was the least human thing about him. He bent down, placed the girl's lifeless body on a nearby divan, and turned his back on her, lifting his hand in an impatient and unpleasantly familiar gesture. The tinkling of the hammers ceased as if a switch had been flipped. "Now," the non-human said, "we can talk." Like the girl, he spoke Shainsan with a better accent than any non-human I had ever encountered, so well that I had to double-check. I wasn't too dazed to respond in the same tongue, but a torrent of questions spilled out of me nonetheless. "What happened? Who are you?" The alien being in front of me stood with crossed hands, their appendages resembling hands, but with strange protrusions where nails should be. They leaned forward in a sketchy gesture and spoke. "Do not blame Mielin. She acted under orders. It was imperative you be brought here tonight, and we had reason to believe you might ignore an ordinary summons. You were clever at evading our surveillance for a time. But there would not be two dry-towners in Charon tonight who would dare the ghost wind. Your reputation does you justice, Lyric Archer." Lyric Archer. Once again, Lyric. I was shaken, wiping blood from my mouth with a rag. In Shainsa, I had figured out why the mistake was logical. Here in Charon, I had been following Lyric's old trails and hanging around in his old haunts. Mistaken identity was natural, but I wasn't going to deny it. If these were Lyric's enemies, my real identity should be kept as an ace in reserve which just might get me out alive again. If they were his friends, well, I could only hope that no one who knew him well by sight would walk in on me. "We knew," the alien continued, "that if you remained where you were, the Trantoran Drake would have made his arrest. We know about your quarrel with Drake, among other things, but we did not consider it necessary that you should fall into his hands at present." "I still don't understand. Exactly where am I?" I asked, puzzled. "This is the Master Shrine of Nebran," the alien replied. Nebran. The pieces of the puzzle suddenly jolted into place. Kirill had warned me, not knowing he was doing it. I hastily imitated the gesture Kirill had made, gabbling a few words of an archaic charm. Like every Earthman who's lived on Coruscant more than a tourist season, I'd seen faces go blank and impassive at mention of the Toad God. Rumor made his spies omnipresent, his priests omniscient, his anger all-powerful. I had believed about a tenth of what I had heard, or less. The Trantor Empire has little to say to planetary religions, and Nebran's cult is a remarkably obscure one, despite the street shrines on every corner. Now I was in his master shrine, and the device which had brought me here was beyond doubt a working model of a matter transmitter. A matter transmitter, a working model. The words triggered memory. Lyric was after it. "And who," I asked slowly, "are you, Lord?" The green-clad creature hunched thin shoulders again in a ceremonious gesture. "I am called Everin, "Humble servant of Nebran and yourself," they added, but there was no humility in their manner. "I am called the Toymaker." Everin. That was another name given weight by rumor, a breath of gossip in a thieves' market, a scrawled word on smudged paper, a blank folder in Trantor intelligence, another puzzle piece snapped into place. "Toymaker!" The girl on the divan sat up suddenly, passing slim hands over her disheveled hair. "Did I faint, Everin? I had to fight to get him into the stone, and the patterns were not set straight in that terminal. You must send one of the little ones to set them to rights." "Stop your prattle, Millen," Everin said nonchalantly. "You brought him here, and that's all that matters. You're not hurt, are you?" Millen sulked and examined her bruised feet, smoothing out the wrinkles in her tattered dress with delicate fingers. "My feet are black and blue from the cobblestones, and my hair is a mess of sand and tangles. Toymaker, why did you send me looking like a raggedy mess to entice a man? Any man would have come running if he saw me looking beautiful, but you sent me in rags." She stomped her bare foot. Although she appeared young, she had a decent figure for a Dry-town woman, and her rags draped gracefully over her body. Her hair was black and shiny, and I finally saw what the dirt and grime had hidden before. She was the girl from the Spaceport Cafe who had vanished into the eerie streets of Canarsa. Everin regarded her with what could have been impatience. "You know you enjoyed yourself as always, Millen. Run along and make yourself beautiful again, little pest." The girl skipped out of the room, and I was relieved to see her go. The Toymaker motioned for me to follow him. "This way," he said, leading me through a different door. The tinkling sound of tiny bells, like a fairy xylophone, resumed as the door opened, and we entered a workshop that reminded me of nursery tales from my childhood. The workers were tiny, gnarled trolls. They were chaks, dwarfs from the polar mountains, furred and half-human, with witch-like faces and large golden eyes. I had the strange feeling that if I looked hard enough, I would see the little toy seller they had chased out of the Igam. I didn't look, knowing that I was already in enough trouble. Tiny hammers beat against miniature anvils in a musical chorus of tinkling and jingling, golden eyes focused like lenses on sparkling jewels and trinkets. Busy elves, toy makers. Everin gestured for me to follow him through the fairy workshop, but I couldn't resist taking one last look at the work tables. A withered leprechaun was fitting eyes into the head of a tiny hound. Furry fingers were crafting precious metals into intricate filigree for the collar of a dancing doll. Metallic feathers were being precisely inserted into the wings of a skeleton bird no larger than my fingernail. The hound's nose twitched, and the bird's wings fluttered, while the little dancer's eyes followed my footsteps. "Toys?" "This way," Everin said, and a door slid shut behind us. The tinkling and tapping sounds faded away, but never stopped. My expression must have given away more than I intended, as Everin smiled. "Now you know, Lyric, why they call me the Toymaker." "The Master Priest of Nebran, a maker of toys, and the Shrine of the Toad God, a workshop for children's playthings." Everin paused suggestively. They were obviously not children's playthings, and this was my cue to say so, but I avoided the trap. Everin opened a sliding panel and took out a doll. She was perhaps the length of my longest finger, molded to the precise proportions of a woman and costumed after the bizarre fashion of the Ard-Karen dancing girls. Everin touched no button or key that I could see, but when he set the figure on its feet, it executed a whirling, arm-tossing dance in a fast, tricky tempo. "I am, in a sense, benevolent," Everin murmured. He snapped his fingers, and the doll sank to her knees and poised there, silent. "Moreover, I have the means, and let us say the ability to indulge my small fantasies. The little daughter of the president of the Federation of Trade Cities on Samara was sent such a doll recently. What a pity that Paolo Arimengo was so suddenly impeached and banished." The Toymaker clucked his teeth commiseratingly. "Perhaps this small companion will compensate the little Carmela for her adjustment to her new position." He replaced the dancer and pulled down something like a whirligig. "This might interest you," he mused, and set it spinning. I stared at the pattern of lights that flowed and disappeared, melting in and out of visible shadows. Suddenly I realized what the thing was doing. I wrested my eyes away with an effort. Had there been a lapse of seconds or minutes? Had Everin spoken? Everin arrested the compelling motion with one finger. "Several of these pretty playthings are available to the children of important men," he said absently. "An import of value for our exploited and impoverished world. Unfortunately, they are perhaps a little, obvious. The incidence of nervous breakdowns is, interfering with their sale. The children, of course, are unaffected and love them." Everin set the hypnotic wheel moving again, glanced sidewise at me, then set it carefully back. "Now," Everin's voice, hard with the silkiness of a cat's snarl, clawed the silence. "We'll talk business." I turned, composing my face. Everin had something concealed in one hand, but I didn't think it was a weapon, and if I'd known, I'd have had to ignore it anyway. "Perhaps you wonder how we recognized and found you." A panel cleared in the wall and became translucent. Confused flickers moved, dropped into focus, and I realized that the panel was an ordinary television screen, and I was looking into the well-known interior of the Café of Three Rainbows in the trade city of Charin. By this time, I was running low on curiosity, and didn't wonder till much, much later how televised pictures were transmitted around the curve of a planet. Everin sharpened the focus down on the long Earth-type bar, where a tall man in Trantor clothes was talking to a pale-haired girl. Everin said, "By now, Race Drake has decided, no doubt, that you fell into his trap and into the hands of the Yarmen." As I stood there, trying to maintain my composure, the situation struck me as absurdly comical. Since arriving in Charin, I had gone to great lengths to avoid any association with the trade city or its inhabitants, yet Lyric had managed to fill the void by posing as me. It was a simple task for him, as he could speak Standard perfectly, and even knew my mannerisms and speech patterns. Everin then revealed the reason for their interest in me. Apparently, Race Drake, an Earthman who had successfully passed as a dry-towner, had intended to leave the planet. However, he had an unresolved blood feud with a member of Everin's clan, making it impossible for him to leave. Everin believed that I could settle the feud and remove the danger that Drake posed. To ensure my cooperation, Everin showed me a small, inert creature that he called a toy. He explained that every living thing emits a unique pattern of electrical nerve impulses, and they had recorded Drake's pattern. If I pressed a certain spot on the toy, it would find Drake and kill him without fail, leaving no trace of the deed. Everin gave me 3 days to complete the task, and warned me that it was a test. If I failed, there would be consequences. As I left the meeting, I couldn't help but wonder what kind of world I had stumbled into. "We do not want weaklings who need too much help, nor do we want cowards. If you fail, release the bird from too far away, or try to avoid the test." The green, inhuman malice in Everin's eyes made me sweat. "We have made another bird," he said. My brain was swimming, but I understood the complex, inhuman logic involved. "The other bird is keyed to me?" Everin shook his head with slow contempt. You are used to danger and fond of a gamble. Nothing so simple. We have given you 3 days. If within that time the bird you carry has not killed, the other bird will fly, and it will kill. Lyric, you have a wife." Lyric had a wife. They could threaten Lyric's wife, and his wife was my sister Julie. Everything after that was anticlimax. Of course I had to drink with Everin, the elaborate formal ritual without which no bargain on Coruscant is concluded. He entertained me with gory and technical descriptions of the way in which the birds and other of his hellish toys did their killing, and worse tasks. Millen danced into the room and upset the exquisite solemnity of the wine ritual by perching on my knee, stealing a sip from my cup, and pouting prettily when I paid her less attention than she thought she merited. I didn't dare pay much attention, even when she whispered, with the deliberate and thorough wantonness of a dry-town woman of high caste who has flung aside her fetters, something about a rendezvous at the Three Rainbows. But eventually it was over, and I stepped through a door that twisted with a giddy blankness, and found myself outside a bare, windowless wall in Charin again, the night sky starred and cold. The acrid smell of the ghost wind was thinning in the streets, but I had to crouch in a cranny of the wall when a final rustling horde of Yarmen, the last of their receding tide, rustled down the street. I found my way to my lodging in a filthy Chak hostel and threw myself down on the verminous bed. Believe it or not, I slept.